Captain Lee Taman stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, watching the stars drift by through the main view screen. 3 years of deep space patrol had taught him to appreciate the quiet moments. In his experience, they never lasted long. Goodbye. Indomitable was humanity's newest exploration ship, built for long missions far from Earth. Lee had commanded her through the Outer Rim territories for 6 months now, mapping new systems and looking for signs of alien life. So far, they had found nothing but empty space and dead rocks. "Captain," called Kim Woobin from the communication station. "I'm picking up something strange." Lee walked over to the young officer's console. Kim had been with the ship since launch, and his hearing was better than any computer when it came to finding signals in the noise of space. "What kind of strange?" Lee asked. "It's definitely artificial, not natural background radiation." Kim adjusted his headset and frowned. "The pattern is too complex to be a beacon, but it's repeating, like someone is sending the same message over and over. Can you clean it up?" "Working on it now, sir." Dr. Park Ji-hai appeared at Lee's shoulder. The ship's language expert had a gift for understanding patterns, whether they came from ancient Earth cultures or alien transmissions. Her dark eyes were already focused on Kim's screen. "How long has it been transmitting?" she asked. "Hard to say. Could be hours. Could be days. The signal is weak, coming from at least 12 light years away." Park leaned forward. "Play it again." The bridge filled with a series of tones and pulses that meant nothing to Lee, but Park's face changed as she listened. Her expression went from curious to concerned. "Kim, can you isolate the mathematical components? There should be a base pattern underneath all that noise." "Already on it, Doctor." Lieutenant Commander Choi So-young looked up from her tactical station. "Captain, should I put the ship on alert?" Lee considered. They were alone out here, light years from the nearest human colony. If this was a first contact situation, they would be making history. If it was a trap, they could all be dead before anyone on Earth even knew what happened. Not yet. Let's see what we're dealing with first. For the next hour, Park and Kim worked together to decode the signal. The rest of the bridge crew watched in tense silence as patterns emerged on their screens. Lee had seen Park work before, but never with such intensity. She barely looked up from her console, her fingers dancing across the keyboard as she tested different translation algorithms. "Got something," Kim announced suddenly. "The signal is definitely a distress call. I can make out coordinates and what looks like a request for help." "From who?" Lee asked. Park finally looked up, her face pale. "From someone calling themselves the Villani Collective. Captain, I think we just made first contact with an alien species." The bridge went completely silent. Everyone stared at the main screen, where the alien message continued to repeat its desperate plea. "What are they saying?" Lee asked quietly. Park's voice was steady, but he could hear the excitement underneath. "They're under attack. Something they call the Harvester Swarm is destroying their worlds. They've lost most of their fleet and their colonies are being evacuated." "How long ago was this sent?" "The signal degradation suggests about 18 hours. Captain, they're asking for help from anyone who can hear them. They say their attackers are unlike anything they've ever seen." Choi spoke up from her station. "Sir, if they're that far away and sent this 18 hours ago, the attack could be over by now," Lee finished. "Or still going on." Dr. Kang Min Ho, the ship's science officer, had been running scans while the others worked on the message. "Captain, I'm not detecting any other ships in our area. If we respond to this, we'll be going in alone." Lee walked back to his command chair and sat down heavily. Every officer on the bridge was looking at him now, waiting for his decision. The regulations were clear. First contact with alien species required approval from Earth Command. But Earth was 12 days away at maximum warp. By the time they got permission to act, the Villani could be extinct. "Park, can you send a message back?" "I can try. Their language is complex, but I think I can manage basic concepts. Tell them we received their distress call. Tell them help is coming." "Sir," Commander Nam Soo-jin said from the engineering station, "we don't know what we're flying into. This could be a trap, or these harvesters could be more than we can handle." Lee nodded. "You're right, but we're not going to let an entire species die while we wait for permission from Earth." He turned to Kim. "Send a priority message to Admiral Yoon at Fleet Command. Full details of the alien transmission and our position. Tell him we're responding to the distress call under Article 7 of the Deep Space Protocols. Article 7 allowed ship commanders to take independent action in extreme situations, but Lee knew he would have to justify his decision when they got back to Earth, if they got back. Choi, plot a course for the Volani coordinates, maximum warp. Course laid in, Captain. Kim, keep monitoring their transmissions. I want to know if the situation changes. Already on it, sir. Lee stood and walked to the front of the bridge. All hands, this is the captain. We have received a distress call from an alien species under attack by hostile forces. We are responding to render assistance. All departments begin preparation for possible combat operations. He paused, looking at each of his officers. I know. This isn't what we signed up for when we left Earth. We came out here to explore and make peaceful contact with other species. But sometimes the universe has other plans. The ship shuddered slightly as the warp drive engaged, pulling them toward an unknown enemy and an alien species that might already be dead. Helm, engage. As the stars blurred past the view screen, Lee made his way to his ready room. He had a message to record for Admiral Yoon, and it might be the last communication Earth ever received from the Indomitable. The recording started with Lee sitting at his desk, looking directly into the camera. He explained the situation quickly and efficiently, knowing that every word would be analyzed by Fleet Command when the message reached Earth. Admiral, we are responding to what appears to be a genuine distress call from an alien species. I know this violates standard first contact protocols, but the situation does not allow for the usual procedures. If these harvesters are as dangerous, as the Volani claim, waiting for approval could mean the extinction of an entire civilization. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. I want it on record that this decision is mine alone. My crew is following orders, and whatever happens out here should not reflect on them. We're heading into unknown territory to face an unknown enemy, but we're going anyway because it's the right thing to do. Lee ended the recording and sat back in his chair. Through his window, he could see the stars streaming past as the Indomitable raced toward its destiny. In a few hours, they would drop out of warp in an alien star system, possibly in the middle of a war zone. He thought about his crew, good people who had volunteered for exploration duty, not combat. They deserved better than being thrown into an alien war. But if the Volani transmission was accurate, they might be the only ones who could help. Computer, shipwide comm. Channel open, Captain. All hands, this is Captain Lee. We are approaching the Volani system. All departments report readiness in 1 hour. We don't know what we're going to find when we get there, but whatever it is, we'll face it together. Lee out. The Indomitable continued its journey through hyperspace, carrying humanity toward its first alien war. Behind them, the message to Earth Command raced through subspace toward home. And ahead of them, an unknown enemy waited in the darkness between the stars. In 12 hours, everything would change. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when someone threatened the innocent while humans were watching. The Indomitable dropped out of warp at the edge of the Volani system, and Captain Lee Tae-min felt his heart sink. The view screen showed a scene of complete destruction. Orbital stations drifted as broken hulks, their lights dark and their hulls split open like broken eggs. Debris fields sparkled in the light of the system's star, the remains of what had once been a thriving civilization. My God, whispered Dr. Kang Min-ho from his science station. Captain, I'm reading the remains of at least 50 space stations and hundreds of smaller vessels. Lee gripped his command chair. Any survivors? Scanning now. Kang's fingers danced over his controls. I'm detecting some active power signatures deeper in the system. Looks like they're hiding in an asteroid field near the 4th planet. Set course. Kim, try to raise them on the frequencies we've been monitoring. As the Indomitable moved carefully through the debris field, Lee studied the wreckage around them. The destruction was unlike anything he had seen before. Ships weren't just destroyed. They looked like they had been systematically stripped. Apart, hull plating was missing along with anything that might contain useful materials. Captain, Kim called out, I'm receiving a response from the asteroid field. It's weak, but they're definitely trying to communicate. Put it through. The bridge filled with a series of musical tones, beautiful but sad. Even without understanding the words, Lee could hear the fear and desperation in the alien voice. Dr. Park worked quickly at her station, cross-referencing the new transmission with the original distress call. I think I can establish basic communication. The speaker seems to be asking who we are and if we're here to help. Tell them we're from Earth, and we received their distress call. Park's reply was a careful series of tones and mathematical sequences. The response came immediately, a rapid burst of excited sounds. They want us to come to their location. They're sending coordinates. Commander Nam Soo-jin looked up from her console. Captain, this could still be a trap. These harvesters might be using survivors as bait. Lee nodded. Choi, full tactical scan of the asteroid field. I want to know if anyone else is hiding in there. Scanning now, sir. I'm detecting 7 alien vessels, all showing minimal power signatures. No sign of these harvesters. Take us in, but keep our shields up and weapons ready. The Indomitable moved slowly into the asteroid field, carefully avoiding the larger rocks. As they approached the coordinates, Lee got his first look at an alien starship. The Volani vessel was beautiful, its hull covered in crystalline structures that caught and reflected light in amazing patterns. But it was also clearly damaged, with several sections dark and others showing signs of hasty repairs. They're requesting permission to come aboard, Park announced. How many? 3 individuals. They say 1 is their leader. Lee made his decision quickly. Permission granted. Commander Nam, prepare a reception in Cargo Bay 2. Full environmental suits for everyone until we know more about their biology. An hour later, Lee stood in the cargo bay, watching as the alien shuttle docked with his ship. The craft was as beautiful as their larger vessels, but he could see damage here too. Burn marks on the hull and hastily welded patches told the story of a people under siege. The airlock cycled, and Lee got his first look at an alien being. The Volani who emerged was nothing like he had expected. It stood nearly 8 feet tall but was incredibly thin, with limbs that looked too delicate to support its height. Its skin appeared to be made of living crystal, shifting between blue and green as it moved. When it turned toward the humans, Lee saw large eyes that held intelligence and sadness in equal measure. Behind the first alien came 2 others, similar in appearance but smaller. All 3 moved with a grace that seemed impossible, as if they weighed almost nothing. Through the translation device Park had prepared, the lead Volani spoke. Its voice was musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. I am Zilak, fleet tender of the Volani Collective. Are you truly here to help us? Lee stepped forward, noting how the alien seemed to flinch slightly at his movement. I am Captain Lee Taman of the United Earth ship Indomitable. We received your distress call and came as quickly as we could. Zilak's crystalline features shifted in what might have been surprise. You came from so far away. Your species travels between the stars? Yes. We've been exploring space for several decades now, but you are so... Zilak paused, as if searching for the right words. So dense, so heavy. How do you survive in the void between worlds? Dr. Shin Yoon-jung, the ship's medical officer, had been taking discreet scans of their visitors. She whispered to Lee, Captain, their bone density is less than half of ours. Their muscle mass is incredibly low. I don't think they could survive on Earth. Lee realized what Zilak meant. To beings who had evolved on a low-gravity world, humans probably looked impossibly robust. Our world is different from yours, Lee explained. We come from what you might call a harsh environment. Zilak's eyes widened. A death world. You are death world beings. The term sent a chill through Lee. We prefer to call it Earth. But tell me about these harvesters. What are we dealing with? The alien leader's crystalline skin darkened. They came from beyond the galactic rim 3 cycles ago. Ships like nothing we had ever seen. Creatures that consume everything in their path. They do not communicate. They do not negotiate. They simply harvest. What do they harvest? Everything. Metal, organic matter, energy. They strip worlds bare and move on. We tried to fight them, but our weapons barely scratch their hulls. Our ships are built for trade and exploration, not war. Commander Nam looked at Lee. How many worlds have they taken? 17 of our colonies. Millions of our people. Zilak's voice carried a pain that needed no translation. We evacuated what we could, but most... Most chose to die on their homeworlds rather than flee. What about other species? Aren't there others who could help? Zilak made a sound that might have been bitter laughter. The Talani hide behind their shields. The Korth have retreated to their home systems. The others simply run. None have the strength to stand against the Harvesters. Lee exchanged glances with his officers. What makes you think we might be different? Because you came, Zilak said, simply. Because you heard our call and traveled across the galaxy to help strangers. And because... The alien paused, studying the humans with its large eyes. Because you survived on a death world. Perhaps you know how to fight in ways we cannot imagine. Dr. Kang spoke up. Can you show us recordings of the Harvester attacks? We need to understand what we're facing. Of course. But I must warn you. The images are disturbing. They moved to the ship's briefing room, where Zilak activated a small device that projected holographic images into the air. Lee watched, in growing horror as the recordings showed massive biomechanical ships descending on Volani colonies. The Harvesters moved with purpose and efficiency, their vessels extending tendrils that literally sucked buildings and vehicles into their hulls. But what shocked Lee most was watching the Volani defense fleet try to fight back. Their weapons were advanced but gentle, designed to disable rather than destroy. When they did manage to damage a Harvester ship, the alien vessels seemed to adapt almost instantly, becoming immune to the same weapon. They learn, Zilak explained. Every weapon we use against them makes them stronger. Every tactic we try becomes useless after the first attempt. How many ships do they have? Choi asked. We estimate several hundred in this region alone, but more arrive every day from their territory beyond the rim. Lee stood quietly for a moment, processing what he had learned. The Harvesters were clearly a formidable enemy, possibly more dangerous than anything humanity had ever faced. But they had never faced humanity either. Zilak, I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. Do you really think we can help? Or are you just desperate? The alien was quiet for a long moment. Captain Lee, my people evolved on a world with low gravity and no predators. We are builders and traders, not warriors. When danger comes, our instinct is to flee or hide. But you... Zilak studied Lee with those large, intelligent eyes. You came toward danger. You traveled across space to help strangers. That is not the behavior of prey animals. That is the behavior of predators. The room fell silent. Lee realized that to these gentle beings, humans might seem like monsters. But they were monsters who had chosen to help instead of hurt. We'll need time to study your data and contact our government, Lee said finally. But I can promise you, we won't abandon you. As the Volani delegation returned to their ship, Dr. Shin approached Lee. Captain, I need to show you something. The medical scans I took of our visitors. In sickbay, she displayed the alien biology on her screens. Look at this bone density, this muscle structure. These beings are incredibly fragile by our standards. A fall that would barely bruise a human could kill them. What are you saying? I'm saying that compared to us, every other species in this galaxy might be made of glass. Captain, what if we're not just another spacefaring race? What if we're the monsters that even the monsters are afraid of? Lee stared at the medical data, understanding dawning on him. Earth hadn't just produced explorers and scientists. It had produced survivors, beings tough enough to thrive on a world that tried to kill them every day. Admiral Yoon Jae-sung stood in the command center of Earth Defense Station, staring at the message from Captain Lee. Around him, the most senior officers in the human fleet worked frantically to process what they had just learned. Confirmed alien. Contact, reported Colonel An Bora from Intelligence. Multiple species. Ongoing war. Hostile force moving in our general direction. Timeline? Yoon asked. Unknown. But if Captain Lee's report is accurate, these harvesters could reach human space within years, maybe months. Admiral Han Ji-won, commander of the First Fleet, looked up from her tactical display. Sir, we need to make a decision. Do we recall the Indomitable and prepare our defenses, or do we support Lee's intervention? Yoon had been asking himself the same question for the past hour. Every military instinct told him to bring Earth's only deep space exploration ship home and prepare for siege. But Lee's message had painted a clear picture. The harvesters would not stop with the Volani. They would keep coming until they had consumed everything in their path. How quickly can we mobilize the fleet? 48 hours for the ready squadrons, Han replied. 72 for full deployment? Do it. I want every ship we have heading for Volani space within 3 days. Sir, interrupted Admiral Lim Kyung-soo, that's our entire deep space fleet. If this is a trap, or if these aliens are hostile, we'll be committing everything based on one captain's judgment. Yoon turned to face his senior staff. Gentlemen, ladies, I've known Lee Tae-min for 15 years. He fought beside me in the colonial wars, and he's never made a decision based on anything but solid intelligence and good judgment. If he says these aliens need help, they need help. And if he says these harvesters are a threat to everyone, including us, then we better deal with them now. Meanwhile, light years away, the Indomitable was learning exactly what humanity would be facing. Captain Lee stood on the bridge watching the tactical display as Commander Choi analyzed the harvester vessels. 3 enemy scouts had appeared at the edge of the system an hour ago, and Lee had ordered his ship to remain hidden among the asteroids. They're definitely biomechanical, Choi reported. Hull composition appears to be part metal, part organic tissue. The ship seemed to be growing rather than built. Dr. Kang looked up from his science station. Captain, I'm detecting some kind of scanning beam. They're examining the debris field, possibly looking for survivors. Are they detecting us? Not yet. Our position in the asteroid field is masking our signature. Lee watched as the alien ships moved through the system with cold efficiency. Their movements were smooth and coordinated, like a school of fish or a flock of birds. These weren't individual ships with separate crews. They were parts of a larger organism. Kim, any communication between the scout ships? Nothing on any frequency we can monitor. If they're talking to each other, it's not through radio waves. Wing Commander Park Jun-ho, the ship's flight leader, studied the enemy vessels through the tactical scope. Sir, those ships don't look like anything in our databases. The hull configurations are completely alien. What's your assessment, Commander? They're fast and they move like a coordinated unit. But their design philosophy is different from ours. Our ships are built to take damage and keep fighting. Theirs look like they're designed to avoid damage entirely. Chief Engineer Oh Chang-min spoke from his position at the engineering station. Captain, I've been analyzing the energy signatures from those ships. They're running on power systems we don't understand, but the energy output is enormous, much higher than anything we could generate. Lee nodded, filing away the information. Every detail could be crucial when the real fighting started. Choi, can you get a weapons lock on the nearest scout? Easily, sir. We're within optimal firing range. But hold fire. I want to see what they do when they find the Volani. They didn't have to wait long. The lead harvester ship detected the hidden alien fleet and immediately changed course. The other 2 scouts moved to flanking positions with mechanical precision. They found them, Kim announced unnecessarily. Through the view screen, Lee watched as the harvester ships approached the Volani hiding place. The aliens' beautiful crystalline vessels tried to run, but they were no match for the enemy's speed. Captain, Gilak's voice came through the communication system. We are under attack. Please, if you can help us. Lee made his decision. Choi, target the lead harvester, full spread of torpedoes. Park, launch all fighters. Sir, Nam warned, we're badly outnumbered. Then we better make sure we hit first and hit hard. The Indomitable burst from the asteroid field like an angry predator, all weapons firing. The human torpedoes struck the lead harvester ship before it could react, and the explosions sent chunks of biomechanical hull spinning into space. But the ship didn't die. Instead, Lee watched in amazement as the damaged sections began to seal themselves. Within minutes, the hull was healing, adapting to resist the same weapons that had just hurt it. What the hell? Choi muttered. The harvesters turned their attention to this new threat. Energy beams lanced out from their weapons, striking the Indomitable's shields. The ship shook under the impact, but the shields held. Return fire all weapons, human. Particle beams and kinetic projectiles hammered the enemy ships. Unlike the gentle Volani weapons, human armaments were designed for one purpose, to destroy the enemy as quickly and efficiently as possible. The nearest harvester ship staggered under the assault, its biomechanical hull cracking and bleeding some kind of fluid into space. But again, it began to adapt, the hull reshaping itself to better deflect the incoming fire. "They're learning," Choi reported. "Each hit is doing less damage than the last." Lee gritted his teeth. "Then we'll have to learn faster. Park, get your fighters in close. Use kinetic weapons only." The human fighters screamed toward the enemy ships at speeds that would have been impossible for most alien pilots. Human bodies could withstand acceleration forces that would crush more fragile species, and the pilots took full advantage of that fact. Commander Park's voice crackled over the comm. "This is Flight Leader, beginning attack run. These things are big, but slow to turn." The fighters dove on the harvester ships like angry wasps, firing armor-piercing rounds at point-blank range. The enemy vessels tried to track the small, fast targets, but human reflexes and G-force tolerance gave the pilots an edge. "Direct hits on target too," Park reported. "But the damn thing is healing faster than we can hurt it." Lee watched the tactical display with growing frustration. The human weapons were effective, but the harvester's ability to adapt was neutralizing their advantage. "Oh, try a different approach. Engine room, give me everything the reactor can handle. Choi, prepare for ramming speed." "Sir?" both officers said simultaneously. "You heard me. If they can adapt to our weapons, let's see them adapt to 3,000 tons of earth steel, moving at full impulse." The Indomitable charged directly at the largest harvester ship. The enemy vessel tried to move out of the way, but human ships were built for combat maneuvers, not just speed. At the last second, Lee ordered, "Emergency reverse. All stop!" The ship's inertial dampeners screamed in protest as the Indomitable stopped just short of collision. The harvester ship, trying to avoid the ram, had exposed its flank. "Now! Full spread, point-blank range! Every weapon on the ship fired simultaneously into the enemy vessel's side." At this distance, the harvester's adaptive hull couldn't spread the damage effectively. The ship broke apart in a brilliant explosion that lit up the asteroid field. "First kill," Choi announced with satisfaction. But their celebration was short-lived. The remaining two harvester ships had adapted their tactics as well. Instead of trying to fight the humans directly, they were focusing their fire on the fleeing Volani vessels. "They're going after the civilians," Lee realized. "All ships, protect the evacuation fleet." The Indomitable raced to intercept, but one of the harvester ships reached a Volani transport before they could stop it. Lee watched in horror as biomechanical tendrils extended from the enemy vessel and began literally dissolving the alien ship's hull. "My God," Dr. Shin whispered. "They're eating it." The harvester ship was consuming the Volani vessel and everyone aboard it, adding their mass and materials to its own hull. As Lee watched, the enemy ship grew larger and stronger. "That's how they reproduce," Dr. Kang said with dawning understanding. "They don't just destroy civilizations. They consume them and use the materials to build more ships." The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. More harvester scouts were arriving at the edge of the system, drawn by the combat. Soon the Indomitable would be facing dozens of enemy vessels. "Captain," Kim announced, "I'm receiving a transmission from Earth Command. The fleet is on its way." "How long?" 18 hours for the advance units, 48 for the main fleet." Lee looked at the tactical display. The Volani had maybe 6 hours before they were completely overrun. "We need to buy them time," he decided. "All ships, prepare for hit-and-run tactics. We're going to make these harvesters work for every kill." As the Indomitable began its deadly game of cat and mouse with the enemy scouts, Lee recorded a message for Admiral Yoon. "Admiral, we've engaged the enemy. They're unlike anything we've ever faced. They adapt to our weapons and grow stronger by consuming other ships. But they have weaknesses. The first ships of the human fleet arrived in Volani space like avenging angels. Captain Jeon Sehun's dreadnought Unconquerable dropped out of hyperspace with guns already charging, followed by Captain Yu Soo-hyung's carrier Relentless and a dozen escort vessels. Admiral Han Ji-won stood on the bridge of her flagship, studying the tactical display that showed the running battle between the Indomitable and 36 harvester scouts. Captain Lee had managed to keep the enemy busy for 16 hours, but his ship was showing heavy damage. "All ships, this is Admiral Han. Form up on my position and prepare for immediate combat operations." The human warships moved into formation with practiced efficiency. Unlike the graceful curves of Volani vessels or the organic flow of harvester ships, the human fleet looked exactly like what it was. weapons built by a species that had learned to fight for survival. "Admiral," reported Captain Ryu Min-kyung. "From the heavy cruiser Defiant, I'm reading massive biomechanical signatures throughout the system. These harvesters are everywhere." "Numbers?" "At least 50 ships, with more arriving every hour. And Admiral, some of these vessels are enormous. The largest one is over 3 kilometers long." Han studied the enemy positions. The harvesters had spread throughout the system, systematically hunting down the remaining Villani survivors. They moved with the coordination of a hive mind, each ship playing its part in a larger strategy. "Captain Jeon, take your battle group and engage the enemy flanks. Captain Yu, launch all fighters and provide close support for the Indomitable. I want these aliens to know they've picked a fight with the wrong species." The human attack began with the controlled fury that had made Earth's military feared throughout known space. The Unconquerable opened fire with its main guns, sending streams of accelerated particles into the nearest harvester ships. Unlike the Villani weapons, human arms were designed to overwhelm defenses through sheer destructive power. Captain Yu's fighters swept through the enemy formation like a plague of metal locusts. The human pilots pushed their craft through maneuvers that would have killed most alien species, using their superior tolerance for acceleration to gain tactical advantage. "This is Red Leader," reported Wing Commander Park Jun-ho, now flying from the carrier. "Beginning attack runs on the larger vessels. These things are tough, but they don't seem to expect us to get this close." The human fighters dove directly into the harvester formation, firing kinetic rounds and plasma charges at point-blank range. When the enemy ships tried to track them, the pilots simply pulled harder turns, using their deathworld physiology to survive forces that would crush other species. But the harvesters were learning. Admiral Han watched on her tactical display as the enemy ships began to adapt their tactics. Ships that had been damaged by particle beams started developing reflective hull sections. Vessels targeted by kinetic weapons grew thicker armor. "They're adapting faster than we expected," reported Commander Kim Da-bin from the intelligence station. "Each ship is sharing information with the others in real time. Then we adapt faster," Han replied grimly. "All ships, switch to rotating weapon types. Don't give them time to adjust to any single attack." The human fleet began a deadly dance with the harvesters, constantly changing tactics and weapon configurations. When particle beams became ineffective, they switched to kinetic bombardment. When the enemy adapted to kinetic weapons, they used plasma charges. When plasma became useless, they rammed. Captain Ryu demonstrated the first Deathworld maneuver, when her cruiser deliberately allowed a harvester ship to grapple it with biomechanical tendrils. Instead of trying to break free, she ordered shaped charges detonated along her ship's hull. "Ramming speed!" Ryu commanded as the explosions breached both vessels simultaneously. Her crew, trained on a high-gravity world and equipped with military-grade environment suits, stormed through the breach into the alien ship. The harvesters, expecting their opponents to die in vacuum like most species, found themselves facing humans who could function in hard space for extended periods. Master Sergeant Cho Hyun-woo led the boarding party through the biomechanical corridors of the enemy vessel. The interior was a nightmare of organic technology and mechanical systems, but the human Marines pressed forward with the determination of predators who had never learned to quit. "Explosives set," Cho reported over the comm. "We're getting out of here." The human boarding party fought their way back to their ship as demolition charges destroyed the harvester vessel from within. It was a tactic no other species had ever attempted, deliberately breaching your own ship to board an enemy vessel in vacuum. Throughout the system, similar scenes played out as human forces engaged the harvesters with increasing aggression. The aliens had evolved their tactics to fight civilized species that valued preservation of life and property. They had never faced an enemy that was willing to sacrifice everything for victory. Dr. Song Hye-jin, a xenobiologist attached to the fleet, made a crucial discovery while analyzing captured harvester technology. "Admiral, I think I understand why they're so successful against other species." "Explain." "Every adaptation they make assumes certain biological limitations. They expect their enemies to be fragile, to avoid radiation, to need specific atmospheric conditions. But humans don't fit those assumptions." As if to prove her point, the communication system crackled with a report from one of the Marine units. "This is Sergeant Bae Ha-na. We've secured the enemy vessel, but there's a radiation leak in the engine compartment." "Acknowledged, Sergeant. Evacuate immediately." "Negative, Admiral. We can handle the radiation exposure. We're going to take their computer core. Admiral Han shook her head in amazement. The Marines were talking about radiation levels that would kill most aliens instantly, but humans could survive the exposure long enough to complete their mission. The tide of battle began to turn as the human forces pressed their advantages. The Harvesters were adapting to human weapons, but they couldn't adapt to human tactics. No amount of technological evolution could prepare them for an enemy that used suicidal charges, fought in hard vacuum, and continued operations in conditions that should be lethal. Admiral? Captain Lee's voice came through the communication system. I'm seeing something I've never seen before. The Harvesters are retreating. On the main tactical display, Han watched as the enemy ships began to withdraw from the inner system. It was the first time in recorded history that Harvester forces had given ground. They're regrouping, Han realized, probably calling for reinforcements. Then we hit them before those reinforcements arrive, declared Captain Jian from the Unconquerable. Admiral, request permission to pursue. Granted. All ships, pursue and destroy. Don't give them time to adapt. The human fleet charged after the retreating Harvesters like wolves chasing wounded prey. The aliens tried to make an orderly withdrawal, but human ships were faster and more maneuverable than anything they had encountered. Captain Yu's fighters harassed the enemy rear guard, while the heavier ships closed for the kill. The Harvesters found themselves caught between the need to retreat and the need to defend themselves, and their coordination began to break down. This is Defiant, Captain Ryu reported. I've got a clear shot at their command ship. Take it. The heavy cruiser's main guns spoke with authority, sending a stream of hypervelocity projectiles into the largest Harvester vessel. The enemy ship's adaptive hull tried to compensate, but the damage was too extensive. The massive biomechanical construct broke apart in a series of secondary explosions. With their command ship destroyed, the remaining Harvesters scattered in all directions. Some fled toward the edge of the system, while others tried to hide among the asteroids. But there was nowhere to run from an enemy that had spent millennia learning to hunt. Systems secured, Admiral Han announced as the last Harvester ship was destroyed. All ships, begin search and rescue operations for Volani survivors. As the human fleet spread out to help the aliens, Admiral Han reflected on what they had accomplished. In less than 6 hours, they had destroyed a Harvester force that had been terrorizing this region of space for years. But she knew this was only the beginning. Intelligence reports suggested there were hundreds, possibly thousands of Harvester ships in this sector alone. The enemy would adapt to human tactics eventually, and they would return in greater numbers. Communication from the Volani fleet, reported the communications officer. Fleet tender Zilak is requesting permission to come aboard. Granted. An hour later, Admiral Han stood in the briefing room facing the alien leader. Zilak's crystalline features showed emotions that needed no translation: gratitude, awe, and something that might have been fear. Admiral Han, Zilak said through the translator. In all our history, we have never seen anything like what your people did today. You fought the Harvesters and won. We did what was necessary. But the way you fought, your ships deliberately damaged themselves to reach the enemy. Your warriors entered environments that should have killed them. Your tactics seemed to assume that death was preferable to defeat. Han realized what the alien was trying to understand. Zilak, on our world, everything tries to kill you. The weather, the animals, the plants, even the ground itself. The news of humanity's victory over the Harvesters spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. On dozens of worlds, species that had hidden in fear for generations watched the transmitted recordings of the battle with amazement and growing hope. Ambassador Zhou Sang-He found herself in the unprecedented position of managing first contact with 17 different alien species simultaneously. Her small diplomatic staff aboard the converted cruise ship New Seoul worked around the clock to establish communication protocols with beings that had only recently learned of humanity's existence. Ambassador, reported her aide, Lieutenant Kim Ye-jin. We've got 3 more species requesting formal contact. The Talani Empire wants to discuss mutual defense treaties, the Korth Federation is offering to share their star charts, and something called the Mindari Consortium wants to establish trade relations. Zhou rubbed her tired eyes. Set up meetings with all of them, and make sure the translation computers are working properly. The last thing we need is to accidentally declare war because of a software glitch. But not all the attention was positive. Deep in the heart of the galaxy, the hegemony of Pax watched the human victory with growing alarm. High Coordinator Yaxthek, leader of the oldest spacefaring alliance in known space, convened an emergency session of the ruling council. These humans have disrupted the balance of power that has maintained peace for 10,000 years, Yaxthek declared to the assembled representatives. They have demonstrated military capabilities that exceed our own, and they have done so while allying themselves with primitive species. Councillor Vren of the Akari spoke next. Perhaps we should be grateful. The harvesters have been a threat to all civilized species. These humans have done what we could not. At what cost? Yaxthek demanded. We have seen their battle recordings. These deathworlders fight with a savagery that belongs in the primitive past. They sacrifice their own ships, expose their crews to lethal environments, and show a disregard for life that is fundamentally incompatible with civilized society. The debate continued for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. The hegemony would not openly oppose humanity, but they would work to contain the threat these dangerous primitives represented. Meanwhile, in Vellani space, Admiral Lim Kyung-soo was learning just how dangerous the galaxy could be. "Admiral," reported Captain John from his position aboard the Unconquerable, "long-range sensors are detecting a massive harvester fleet approaching from the galactic rim. Estimated arrival time, 6 hours. Lim studied the tactical projection with growing concern. The enemy force was enormous, over 200 ships including several command vessels larger than anything they had seen before. How did they mobilize so quickly? Dr. Song Hye-jin, who had been studying captured harvester technology, provided the answer. "Admiral, I don't think they mobilized. I think this force was already in motion before our first battle. The harvesters were planning a major offensive against this entire region of space. You're saying we stumbled into the middle of their invasion?" "Exactly. Our victory didn't trigger this response, and we just happened to be here when it arrived. The implications were staggering. If the harvesters had been planning to invade this entire sector, then dozens of species were at risk. The human fleet, despite its recent victories, was badly outnumbered. Communications: send a priority message to Earth Command, request immediate reinforcements, and inform them we're about to face the largest harvester force on record." But Admiral, Lim knew that help from Earth was days away. Whatever happened in the next few hours, the human fleet would have to face it alone. "All ships, prepare for defensive operations. And someone find me Admiral Han. I'm going to need her tactical expertise." Admiral Han Ji-wan was aboard the Relentless, coordinating the evacuation of Vellani civilians when the call came. She transferred her flag to the command ship and immediately began planning the defense. "We can't win a straight fight," she announced to the assembled captains. 200 ships against 50? Those are impossible odds, even for us. "Then what do you suggest?" asked Captain Ryu from the Defiant. "We don't fight them all at once. We use the asteroid fields and planetary debris to break up their formation. Force them to come at us in smaller groups." Captain Lee, his ship finally repaired after its long solo battle, spoke up from the view screen. "Admiral, I've been thinking about the Harvester Coordination System. They share information instantly, which makes them incredibly efficient, but it also makes them predictable." "Explain." "They adapt to threats, but they do it uniformly. If we can fool part of their fleet into making the wrong adaptation, we might be able to exploit that weakness across their entire force." Han considered the idea. It was risky, but everything they had done since arriving in Vellani space had been risky. "What did you have in mind?" "We let them capture one of our ships, a ship that's been modified to make them think our weapons work differently than they actually do." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They were talking about deliberately sacrificing a ship and crew to deceive the enemy. "I'll volunteer the Indomitable," Lee said quietly. "My crew has been fighting these things longer than anyone. If anyone can sell the deception, it's us." "Captain, what you're suggesting is suicide." "Maybe. But if it works, it could save millions of lives across dozens of worlds." Admiral Han made the hardest decision of her career. "Do it. But I want backup plans in place. If this goes wrong, we need to be ready for a fighting retreat." The next few hours were spent in frantic preparation. The Indomitable was fitted with fake weapons systems and false computer records. Captain Lee's crew volunteered to a man to participate in the deception, knowing they might not survive. When the Harvester fleet arrived, It was even more massive than the long-range sensors had suggested. The enemy ships filled space from horizon to horizon, their biomechanical hulls gleaming in the light of the system's star. Phase 1, Admiral Han announced. Captain Lee, you're clear to begin. The Indomitable burst from its hiding place among the asteroids, apparently fleeing from the approaching enemy fleet. The ship's engines left a clear energy signature that the harvesters could easily track. As planned, the enemy took the bait. A dozen harvester ships peeled off from the main fleet to pursue the lone human vessel. They caught up with the Indomitable, near the 4th planet, where Captain Lee put up a convincing fight using the modified weapons. The fake particle cannons appeared to be devastatingly effective against harvester ships, cutting through their adaptive hulls like they were made of paper. The enemy vessels tried to adapt, restructuring their defenses to counter the apparent new threat. "They're taking the bait," Lee reported as his ship took heavy damage from the harvester response. "The entire fleet is adapting to defend against particle weapons." Phase 2, Admiral Han ordered. The real human fleet emerged from hiding throughout the system, but instead of particle weapons, they used kinetic bombardment and plasma charges, the harvesters having adapted their defenses. For particle weapons were vulnerable to the actual human arsenal. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. Human ships dove through the enemy formation like wolves among sheep, their weapons ripping through harvester hulls that had been optimized to resist the wrong type of attack. Captain Ryu led a squadron of heavy cruisers in a charge straight through the center of the enemy fleet. This is Defiant, beginning the Kyongbok maneuver. The human ships accelerated to ramming speed, then at the last second fired everything they had point-blank into the enemy vessels before breaking away. It was a tactic that required split-second timing and nerves of steel, but it devastated the harvester formation. Wing Commander Park led the fighter squadrons in harassment attacks that kept the enemy ships from coordinating their response. The human pilots flew through crossfire that should have killed them, using their superior reflexes and G-force tolerance to survive in an environment that would have been instantly fatal to most species. But the harvesters were adapting again. Admiral Han watched on her tactical display as the enemy ships began to reorganize, their defenses shifting to counter the real human weapons. "All ships prepare for close engagement. We're going to have to do this the hard way." The final phase of the battle was a brutal melee that raged across the entire system. Human ships, built for close combat, engaged the harvesters at ranges where most species would never fight. The enemy's superior numbers began to tell, but human determination and superior tactics kept the battle even. Captain Jones' dreadnought Unconquerable found itself surrounded by 6 harvester ships. Instead of trying to break free, he ordered his crew to prepare for something that had never been attempted before. "Engineering, overload the main reactor. Set it for controlled detonation. Sir, that will destroy the ship, and everything within 10 kilometers. Do it." The Unconquerable became a massive bomb, its reactor detonation taking out half a dozen enemy ships and clearing a path for the rest of the human fleet. Captain Gion and his crew escaped in life pods moments before the explosion lit up the sky. As the battle raged on, it became clear that both sides were approaching exhaustion. The harvesters had lost over half their fleet, but the humans had lost a third of theirs. 6 months after the great battle in Volani space, the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. The unified defense fleet that had grown from humanity's initial intervention now patrolled dozens of star systems, protecting species that had lived in fear for generations. Admiral Lee Tae-min stood on the bridge of the new Indomitable, watching mixed crews of humans and aliens work together with an efficiency that would have been impossible just a year ago. His old ship had been rebuilt and upgraded with technology from 6 different species, creating something entirely new. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Commander Choi So-young, now his executive officer, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. Admiral Yoon wants to speak with you directly." Lee made his way to his ready room, where the holographic projector showed the familiar face of his old friend and mentor. "Jae-sung," Lee said warmly. "How are things on Earth?" "Complicated, Admiral," Yoon replied with a tired smile. "The politicians are having a hard time adjusting to the idea that we're now responsible for the defense of half the galaxy. The economic opportunities are incredible, but so are the risks. And the hegemony of Pax? Yoon's expression darkened. Still making trouble. They've been funding pirate raids against our shipping lanes and spreading propaganda about the dangers of deathworld militarism. Major Kim Ye-jin's intelligence network has documented at least 12 incidents in the past month. Lee nodded grimly. The older spacefaring species had not taken kindly to humanity's sudden rise to prominence. While they couldn't openly oppose the United Defense Fleet, they were doing everything possible to undermine human influence through sabotage and political maneuvering. What about the new threat intelligence has been reporting? That's why I'm calling. Long-range scouts have confirmed it. Ancient automated defense platforms throughout the galactic rim are activating. Whatever. Built them is long dead, but the machines are still following their original programming, which is to eliminate any species that achieves faster than light travel. It appears the galaxy has been through this cycle before. Lee felt a chill run down his spine. How many platforms are we talking about? Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. And Taemin, these things make the harvesters look like children's toys. The transmission ended, leaving Lee alone with his thoughts. Through his viewport, he could see the mixed fleet conducting joint training exercises. Volani navigators worked alongside human helmsmen, while Korth engineers maintained systems designed by Talani scientists. It was an unprecedented level of cooperation, but would it be enough? "Bridge to Admiral," came Choi's voice over the intercom. "We're receiving an emergency transmission from the Rim Scouts." Lee hurried back to the bridge, where the main view screen showed Captain Ryu Min Kyung aboard the Deep Space Explorer Pathfinder. "Admiral," Ryu reported, her face grim. "We've made contact with the automated platforms. They're not just activating randomly. They're coordinating. And they've already begun moving toward inhabited systems." "Show me." The tactical display filled with sensor readings that made Lee's heart sink. The ancient platforms were massive, each one the size of a small moon. They moved with purpose and precision, their course clearly aimed at the nearest populated worlds. "How long do we have?" Lee asked. "Based on their current speed, approximately 3 weeks before they reach the outer colonies." Lee turned to his communications officer. "Send an immediate alert to all member species. Emergency council meeting in 12 hours. The council chamber aboard the diplomatic station Harmony had never seen such a gathering. Representatives from 37 different species sat around the circular table, their translators working overtime to maintain communication between beings who had never imagined they would need to cooperate. Fleet Tender Jilak of the Volani spoke first. "The ancient records speak of a time before recorded history when the galaxy was purged of intelligent life. We thought they were myths." Commander Thek of the Talani Empire leaned forward. "My people's archives contain similar stories. A great cleansing that reset galactic civilization every few million years." Dr. Song Hye-jin, now serving as Earth's chief xenobiologist for the United Fleet, presented her analysis. "Based on the technology we've observed, these platforms were built by a civilization far more advanced than any current species. They appear to be designed to activate when the galactic population reaches a certain threshold of technological development." "You're saying they're programmed to commit genocide?" asked Ambassador Zhou Sang-hee. "Precisely. And according to our calculations, the current level of spacefaring species in the galaxy has just crossed that threshold." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Every species represented in the room, every civilization that had achieved faster-than-light travel, was now marked for extinction by machines built by their distant predecessors. "What are our options?" asked Counselor Vren of the Akari. Admiral Han Ji-won, now commander of the Unified Defense Fleet, stood to address the assembly. "We fight. These platforms may be advanced, but they're still machines. They can be destroyed." "With what?" demanded High Coordinator Yaxthek, who had reluctantly joined the council when the threat became known. "Our combined fleets number in the thousands. These platforms number in the tens of thousands, and each one has the firepower of an entire fleet." "Then we get creative," Lee interjected. "It's what we do best." The planning session that followed lasted 18 hours. Military commanders, scientists, and politicians from dozens of species worked together to devise a strategy that might save galactic civilization. The plan they developed was audacious, desperate, and typically human in its disregard for conventional wisdom. "We're going to attack their central command node," Lee explained to the assembled fleet commanders 3 days later. "Intelligence suggests there's a primary control platform at the galactic core that coordinates all the others. If we can destroy it, the rest should shut down." Captain Jeon Si-hoon, commanding the rebuilt Unconquerable, raised an obvious concern. "Admiral, the galactic core is 26,000 light-years away. Even with our fastest ships, it would take months to reach it." "Which is why we're not going to fly there," Lee replied with a grim smile. "We're going to use their own technology against them." Dr. Kang Min-ho had been studying the captured platform fragments for weeks. His discovery was revolutionary. The ancient machines used a form of instantaneous transportation that made human hyperspace technology look primitive. "We've identified the transport nodes," Kang explained. "If we can capture one of the smaller platforms intact, we can use their transport network to reach the core in a matter of hours instead of months." The mission to capture a platform became the largest military operation in galactic history. The combined fleet moved toward the nearest automated unit, a mid-sized platform that was advancing on the Korth homeworld. The battle that followed demonstrated how much the galaxy had learned. From human tactics, Talani ships performed impossible maneuvers while Korth vessels used ramming attacks that would have been suicide for their crews before human training. Mindari fighters flew through crossfire that defied all previous concepts of space combat. But it was Master Sergeant Cho Hyun-woo and his mixed-species Marine unit who secured the victory. The boarding action on the automated platform was conducted in an environment that would have killed most aliens instantly: hard vacuum, intense radiation, and gravitational fields that fluctuated wildly. "Platform secured," Cho reported as his team fought their way to the control center. "But Admiral, you need to see this." The images transmitted from the platform's core showed technology that was both beautiful and terrifying. Crystalline structures held patterns of energy that seemed to dance with their own intelligence. And at the center of it all was a message, written in mathematical concepts that were universal. Dr. Park Ji-hai worked frantically to translate the ancient text. "It's a warning," she announced. "The builders of these platforms, they were trying to prevent something they called the final convergence." "What kind of convergence?" Lee asked. "I'm not sure. The translation is difficult, but it seems to suggest that if too many species achieve advanced technology simultaneously, it triggers some kind of catastrophic event. The platforms weren't built to commit genocide. They were built to prevent the end of the universe." The discovery changed everything. The ancient machines weren't mindless killers. They were the galaxy's immune system, designed to prevent a cosmic disaster that their builders had foreseen. "Can we communicate with them?" Admiral Han asked. "Possibly. But, Admiral, according to this data, we may have already passed the point of no return. The final convergence they were trying to prevent may have already begun." As if summoned by her words, long-range sensors detected something emerging from the void between galaxies. Energy signatures unlike anything ever recorded, moving toward the Milky Way with impossible speed. "Whatever's coming," Lee announced. "To the combined fleet, we face it together. Human, Vellani, Talani, all of us. The galaxy united as one people." Fleet Tender G-Lock spoke for all the assembled species. "When we first met the humans, we called them Deathworlders and feared their violence. Now we understand that their strength comes not from their world, but